Good afternoon, Tony Dattino, founder of the USA Memory Championship, and happy to say we're getting more registrations for our 27th USA Memory Championship, which we'll be doing qualifying events in July and the final event here in Full Sail University in Winter Park, Florida in August. And as I continue to do my reading, I come across this article on how our emotions impact on memory formation and ability to recall. And it brings me back to the mental athletes that have won the championship, how they've learned how to put some level of emotions and body actions and language into retaining information in a competition and then recalling it as they get asked to do so. But it also shares with me how at times the stress or the intention of a competition is neutralized. And so how they've been able to stay focused and keep their minds attentive to what they're trying to retain and how they're inputting into their brains, and then their ability to then recall it under a very stressful situation. And I always think about that as we reflect on when we started doing the memory championships and putting people on stage and had TV cameras focused on them, and what an impact and a difference that had to their ability to stay focused and retain, and how at times emotions can have an impact. And so I always recall one of the high school students that I coached in each of the events for the memory competition, and thought he was going to come into this event and he was just going to just knock it out of the park. And then the very first event, when they said let the competition begin, he froze. His stress levels just blocked out his memory. So our emotions can have a positive impact to what we're trying to retain. And our emotions can also cause what we call pattern interrupts, and we have a blockage of information and we can't remember anything. So scenes of accidents, there are some heightened experiences in competitions and things, all have an impact. So this thing called emotion has a balance of it can help and it also can hinder. So here's an article in the April issue of Mind, Mood, and Memory that comes out of Massachusetts General. I just love this magazine. I look forward to it every month when I receive it. It says, emotionally charged memories last longer, so attaching a heartfelt sentiment to a new memory helps them to endure and stay in long term. But as I've also explained to you earlier, it also can have an impact when there's an emotional thing that causes a stress to you, and you may want to forget it. And so this thing called emotion, an emotional brain, has two impacts, one that can be positive and one that can be, I want to forget this stuff. So let me just tell you who wrote this. I always like to tell you who the author of these studies are. Out of Massachusetts General, this is written by Lauren Pollack, Pollak. Lauren is a PhD in neuropsychology, and she directs the adult clinical services at Massachusetts General. So thank you to Lauren for a really, I thought, a superb article that she has put forth in the April issue of Mind, Mood, and Memory. So here's one thing. She talks about when the situation is emotionally charged, so we got some emotions to it. We're going to heighten our response, fight or flight. We're going to pay more attention to it. When our attention is heightened, our memory for that information improves. But as I also said earlier, and she also writes in this, sometimes when those emotions are negative or experiences we're going to forget, we call that post-traumatic stress syndrome, we go the other way. It's like, how do we forget this? We're more likely to think about and mentally replay emotional situations and events than we are neutral. So one of the techniques that you teach people in terms of memory is, can they put some emotion to their Roman rooms? So when they're walking around, what we call the Roman room loci method, can you put some emotion to the pictures, to the words, to the symbols, to what you're trying to retain and recall from memory? Can you put in a happy face? Can you put in a sad face? Can you put in some type of an emotional positive, a love face that can help you retain the information? By doing so, we essentially rehearse the situation, increase the likelihood it's stored. when you experience emotions, a part of the brain that is involved in processing is active, which is another way of saying when you have an emotional response to something, right? Your fight or flight, or your joy, you're happy, you're pleasant, you're enthused about something, you kind of pick it up and your emotions are positive, and now you're doing something more to activate the part of the brain that processes your emotions, which then sends a signal to the hippocampus, which is what your brain is using, the function of your brain that's responsible for maintaining memory. So now you've actually been able to do something that enlightens or electrifies the part of your brain that's going to help you to retain. The memories of that situation, when you've put that together, then are stronger and they last longer. Now, emotions can also make events about our feelings. So how do we feel about a given situation? What are the given feelings we have? I'm enthused, I'm happy, or I'm sad, angry, I'm furious about something, and now on the other side of the fence, do we want to forget this? And I always remember reading a book by Dr. Richard Tibbetts at Advent Health. It's called Forgive to Live. He talked about when people get you angry and you hang on to those emotions, it's really not a good thing for your whole body's immune system. And so when you're angry at someone and you hang on to that in terms of your memories or the response that you're processing for it, that actually changes the chemical structure of the brain and of your body. And it really can begin to break down your immune system. So there's a situation where the emotions swing the other way, and it's not really good. We can all go back, well, we all cannot go back now as the time is going by. And I was thinking of 9/11, and you can think of where you were that day. If you're old enough to have experience in 2001, then you can go back to almost, where was I? When did I hear this? What was I doing? And I certainly can. I go back and think I was, for me, a highly emotional impact. And I can certainly remember where I was, what time I got a call from my daughter wanting to know where I was and what I was doing, since she knew that evening I was doing a training session for New York City subway managers a few blocks away from the towers. And so I come up from a workshop that I was doing at 7 a.m. Actually, we finished at 8 a.m. in the morning, and some of the people wanted to go to the towers to go have breakfast, and I decided I was tired, I was up all night, I wanted to go home and get to bed. So she caught me as I was finally laying down on the bed, ready to get some sleep, and the next thing I know is this phone call, and she's telling me to put on my TV, and I watched this thing, and it just, the emotions of it just kind of stuck in my head. Watching this and thinking, my goodness, I was just a few blocks away just an hour or two ago, and it's hard to believe what I was watching. So what we really want to do is figure out what are the experiences in our life that we want to remember and retain, and how do we go about doing that. So give emotional content to things. It helps to strengthen memories when we know what's going on and we do it in a positive way. When we're exposed to information through our either hearing, reading, we ask ourselves a key question. What's the feeling that we get? Do I feel good about this? Do I something I want to put some time into and put some context to it? Or is it something I want to get rid of? We might think about whether we relate to the situation. So how do we relate to it? And we ask ourselves whether someone we know has ever experienced something similar. So now we start making what we call links and connections. So I have an emotional response. I know somebody else who loves that. I know a friend of mine who enjoys that experience, who shared something with me. And so we connect it, and the more links and connections we can make in our memories, the easier it is for us to grab one of those connections, and it leads to the others. And so it's like the roots of a tree system, all connected to the major trunk. And so I always think of our brain, it's like these are the roots of a tree that I watched growing in my backyard. And so those roots, as they're spreading out, are very much like the neurons and the fibers in our brain that help us to retain and recall information. And then you can label your feelings of an event or information with a specific word. For example, thinking you didn't like an upsetting bit of news, you can use the word, I was alarmed, or I was stunned, and it pushed me backwards a bit. Or a piece of news that you had, the Yankees won the World Series for the first time in a bunch of years, and wow, there's a joy and there's a happiness in it. So there are different things that we can do that help to improve our memories and our ability to retain information that has some emotional charge. So step back and think of something that happened in your life that you were emotionally thrilled and loved and had a passion and excitement about, and see how you can step back and recall about it, and just recognize if you can structure what you're learning today in that same format with those same skills and techniques, how much more you can remember for passing the exam, becoming a profession, and something you never thought possible. And let me know what's happening in your life. It makes a difference.